The energy is gone. Good afternoon once more. All right, that's much better. My name is Ken Mijungu. I work for Standard Group PLC. It's a media house right here in Kenya, one of the oldest, over 100 years old. I'm the deputy editor of Kenya Television Network, that's KTN. I hope you had an opportunity to watch it. I'm also an advocate. I'm a lawyer right here in the country. And I'm glad this afternoon to be here with you to moderate this session. For the next few minutes, I'll be in charge technically. So I want to welcome you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, once more to the Africa Governance Report 2023, themed The Unconstitutional Change of Government in Africa. This is what we're talking about this afternoon. I know most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with this. This is a report that is produced by the African Peer Review Mechanism Secretariat in collaboration with the members of the African Governance Platform of the African Governance Architecture, that's AGA, pursuant to the African Union Assembly decision of December 7, 2022 ordinary session held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in February of 2019. I'd like to give a highlight of this report just before I invite our first spokesperson. Now, this is the third edition of the AGR 2023 report, which is themed, as I mentioned, the unconstitutional change of governments in Africa. A little background: in February of last year, the 35th ordinary session of the AU Assembly held in Addis Ababa, decision of the Assembly 815/35 expressed concern of the resurgence of the unconstitutional changes of governments in Africa. Now, the Assembly called on the member states to uphold constitutionalism and fully respect the Africa Union shared values, normative instruments and legal instruments, particularly the African Union Constitutive Act of 2002 and the African Charter of Democracy, Election and Governance. As a follow-up, on May the 28th of 2022, the AU Assembly 16th Ordinary Summit on Terrorism and Unconstitutional Change of Government held in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea under the theme Unconstitutional Change of Government, consolidated actions to strengthen the constitutionalism and democracy, directed the Africa Peer Review Mechanism and the African Governance Architecture Platform to remodel the third edition of the biannual African Governance Report, that's AG23, to reflect issues related to unconstitutional changes of government on the continent. That's the background of what we are doing this afternoon. So to begin us off, I'd like to begin with the opening remarks. And for this, I will invite Professor Eddie Maloka, the Chief Executive Officer, APRM, Continental Secretariat, to give us his opening remarks. Sir, you can do it from where you are, or you can come to the platform. There's a mic there, whichever makes you comfortable. Because he was behind it, let's give him a hand of applause as he makes it to the podium. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Please allow me to stand on the protocol that was proposed to us by our moderator that recognizes our host, the Minister Ndungu. We are very fortunate to be received by him yesterday. And also the Chair of the Executive Council, who's also the Foreign Minister of Comoros, His Excellency, the Minister Douahir, and then the Chair of the Executive of the Focal Points of the APRM, Minister of Sierra Leone, Minister Yumkela, and of course our dear colleagues from the African Union Commission who are here. Ambassador Bankole, we are happy that you are here, and members of the diplomatic corps, our partners who work with us, members of the platform, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol is duly observed. Your Excellencies, please allow me to welcome you to this launch of the Africa Governance Report 2023 on unconstitutional changes of government. It is a pleasure, Your Excellencies, to reach this milestone as a collective for the betterment of our continent, and also to really thank the countries that participated in this exercise. I've already made reference to Sierra Leone, represented here by the Minister, Comoros, also represented by the minister. Chad here represented by the CEO of the Chad APRM, my brother, welcome. And also the Guinea, Republic of Guinea, my ambassador, thank you very much for coming. And of course, ambassador also from Lesotho, also representing the government of Lesotho, participated. The only missing country is Sudan for obvious reasons, and we're in touch with them before this recent developments. And we were also intending to conduct similar exercises in Mali and Burkina Faso. The authorities in Mali requested postponement until the referendum, so we'll re-engage with them after the referendum. Burkina Faso, when we were there the very same day, we're supposed to meet the authorities. That's when the coup happened. So we had to focus on our exit from the country. So we'll soon be re-engaged in the country. The AGR 2023, Your Excellencies, is a timely report that has culminated into a program of action that needs to be implemented by various stakeholders at different levels, including member states, the African Union, non-state actors, and development partners. Excellencies, here is the hard copy of the report. And in here, in my pocket, I have the soft copy. So I hope I'm not the only one who's got the soft copy hidden in my pocket. So you're supposed to have on your desk a copy of the hard copy and also a copy of the soft copy. And it will also be available online on both the APRM and of course, our colleagues at the Commission will also assist. And I'm also informed that this launch is being streamed live. And we thank our colleagues from the Commission for helping us. And of course, in developing this report, we use a very thorough methodology that you're all familiar with, working with countries, country offices, and also an inclusive process that is bottom-up, involving even the organs and the various bodies of the African Union, including the Permanent Representative Committee in Addis Ababa. Your Excellencies, let me appreciate the efforts by member states in supporting the APRM and the AGAF platform. The support witnessed over the years in consolidating and scaling up the initiatives. Of course, this initiative needs to improve governance in Africa. Your Excellencies, let's also join me really in expressing our gratitude to His Excellency President Mababio, who has just been re-elected as President of Sierra Leone, but he's also the chair of the APRM and and he led from the front this initiative. And we thank you, and he's represented here by his minister, and also for getting in direct contact with the authorities of the countries that are involved in this exercise. This exercise permitted the teams to interact with various political and governance institutions to examine pertinent issues that keep manifesting on the continent. Your Excellencies, the African continent has largely maintained peace. However, we have seen the resurgence of unconstitutional government in recent years, which perhaps have been impelled by the impact of COVID-19 pandemic that witnessed the breakdown of social infrastructure in and among others, and facing, of course, a number of countries also facing recession, thus compounding the existing weaknesses and also the fault lines. The AGR 2023 provides a formulation of robust responses towards the deepening of democracy and collective security response on our continent. The report reveals the nexus between unconstitutional change of government and development, gender, trade, and emergencies, and maps out the various trends, causes, and triggers of unconstitutional change of government on the continent. The AGR notes how UCGs proliferate on the geographical peripheries of states. 2, the predominant cross-border nature of UCG that necessitates regional as well as multilateral responses. And then 3, the human material and financial responses which sustain UCG, which are often supplied from spaces which might not yet be overtly affected by the phenomenon. Furthermore, Your Excellency, the report observes the evolution of normative frameworks on UCG that provides compelling evidence of the relationship between UCG and weak economic governance and poor public sector accountability through a number of factors. We'll enter into some of the details during the panel discussions. Your Excellencies, you are aware that the member states and their citizens have been at the receiving end of sanctions at various levels. Therefore, the report analyzes the efficacy and effectiveness of the African Union sanctions regime. The report highlighted the coherence between the United Nations and AU sanctions regime and noted the different approaches to implementation of decisions and the need for the African Union to work in synergy with the Regional Economic Commission's sanctions regime and further establish a model that reflects African realities. Your Excellencies, both the APRM and the AGA platform members encourage member states to reflect on the findings of the report and offers their support towards the implementation of the recommendations. Further to this, the APRM, in collaboration with the AGA platform and development partners, intend to provide technical support to the review states for the integration of the National Program of Action, or the integration of the recommendation into their National Program of Action and also their respective national development plans. Your Excellencies, this report will not have been a success without the support of our colleagues and partners. I wish also to recognize the government of the United States of America through USAID, the European Union, GIZ, and of course our colleagues at the United Nations Development Program. Your Excellencies, I'd like to thank yourselves, the chair of the AGA platform, and all the relevant policy organs of the African Union, as well as our strategic partners who guided and assisted the process of validation of this report, and hope that this edition of AGR 2023 will further encourage member states to invest more fervently towards effort of warding off, managing, and putting in place strategies for the prevention of unconstitutional changes of government across our continent. I thank you for your kind attention.
At home, we say asante sana. Thank you for the excellent work, and you'll see it shortly in the report. I am told that if you don't have a report on your table, there's a flash disk, you'll be able to see it. But apart from that, there's a QR code that will be provided. I know where it is right now. And you can also get the report online from all the platforms. I hear it somewhere else, the QR code, but you can access the report through that, apart from the flash disks and the limited copies of the printed report. So if you don't have a hard copy, just know that you can still be able to access it. And I'd like to encourage everyone, this is your event. It's a free event. Take as much pictures as you can, post them on your Twitter pages, personal pages. If you have Instagram like myself, you can even stream this event. I'm told it's free for all. You can tag the APRM plus other partners, if you will. So thank you very much, Bwana CEO. It's now my pleasure to welcome the representative or the chairperson of the African Governance Platform at the political level. This is His Excellency, Honorable Litha Musimi Ogana, Commissioner of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Karibu sana.
Your Excellency, Minister Dohi.com, African Peer Review Mechanism Focal Point, Union of Comoros, and representative of the chairperson of the African Union. Your Excellency, Professor Mohamed Fodi Yemkela, Minister of Political and Public Affairs, APR Focal Points for Sierra Leone, and chairperson of the APR Focal Points Committee. Your Excellency, Professor Njuguna Ndungu, our host minister, the APRM Focal Point for Kenya, and Secretary to the Office, National Treasury and Planning in the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Dr. Wonke Gebeyu, IGAD Executive Secretary, and PGA Vice President at political level, Professor Eddie Maloka, Director General of APRM Continental Secretariat, Your Excellency, Commissioner Ambassador Bankole, AU Commissioner for Peace and Political Affairs in the AU Commission, heads of African Union organs present here, President of the Pan-African Parliament, President of the Court, and presidents and heads of all the AU organs and agencies represented, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and pleasure for me to address you on behalf of the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Commissioner Remi Ngoilumbu, who is also the president of the African Governance Architecture Platform, and also in my capacity as the focal point and frontline commission of the African peer review mechanism in the Commission on this occasion of the launch of the APRM report on governance in Africa 2023 edition. The report that the APRM is launching today in collaboration with the AGAP platform is timely, in that it represents an analysis by an organ of the African Union of the phenomenal changes of unconstitutional changes of government, especially at a time when our continent is currently facing a resurgence of unconstitutional changes of government. As you may know, the preparation of this report on unconstitutional changes of government marks the culmination of a largely consultative and rigorous process, including the organization of consultative meetings and multi-stakeholder content validation sessions prior to the adoption of the Assembly at the 36th ordinary session held in February 18 and 19, 2023 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I would like to extend gratitude to His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, for his support on the endorsement of the AGR. Allow me to also thank the hosts, Minister Professor Dugunan Dongo, on behalf of the government of Kenya, for the excellent hospitality that we've received during the preparatory process for this launch, and indeed since we arrived in this country. I would like to acknowledge and congratulate His Excellency Professor Mohamed Fodi Yamkela, Minister of Political and Public Affairs, the APR Focal Point for Sierra Leone, and Chairperson of the APR Focal Points Committee for his leadership in this process. I would like particularly to congratulate the APRM Secretariat led by Professor Eddie Maloka for the professional work that they have shown in the effort to accomplish the mission assigned to them in accordance with various decisions of the Assembly of Heads of States and Government of the African Union. Many thanks go to the APRM structures that supported him in carrying out this study, namely the APR panel of eminent persons, the APR Focal Points Committee, for their involvement in the preparation of the report. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the report we are launching, although carried out in a targeted sample of 6 countries, namely the Kingdom of Lesotho, the Republic of Sierra Leone, the Union of the Comoros, the Republic of Chad, and the Republic of Guinea and of Sudan. States of the African Union for a better understanding of the root cause and impact of unconstitutional changes of government on Africa's system of governance. I have no doubt that recommendations contained in this report, once effectively implemented, will strengthen governance and assist member states in preventing and addressing the challenges of unconstitutional changes of government in Africa, which often lead to political instability and serious and massive human rights violations. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this opportunity to invite state parties to pay attention to the contents of the report and to adopt appropriate measures to implement the recommendations for better governance in our continent. It is also our collective responsibility to work towards the realization of our common goal, which is to the eradication of phenomenon of unconstitutional changes of government. And in this respect, I would like to invite us to work towards widespread dissemination of the report's conclusion and follow up on the implementation of its recommendations. I am delighted that a roadmap will be drawn up to monitor the implementation of the report's recommendation. Honorable ministers, honorable commissioners, heads of AU organs, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close by reiterating the commitment of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights under the leadership of the Honorable Chairperson to disseminate the report's analysis conclusions and recommendations as widely as possible whenever the opportunity arises, notably during constructive dialogue with member states in connection with their periodic reports and during various activities to promote human and people's rights in Africa. I thank you for your attention.
Your Excellency, thank you so much. And Professor Maloka, thank you so much also for the opening remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, I think they deserve a round of applause. Asanteni sana. For the welcoming remarks, it's my pleasure and privilege to invite Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, the APRM Focal Point Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury and Planning for the Republic of Kenya, to make his welcoming remarks. Prof, karibu. Let's clap for Prof as he makes his words.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. Oh, wow. Are we still alive? Good afternoon. Just like he said, I found everybody having lunch, so I thought everybody is quite strong. Thank you very much, and I'm indeed very happy to be here and to provide some welcoming remarks. And to do that, let me start with the usual protocol. Your Excellency Mohamud Ode Yamkela, Minister for Political Affairs and the Chairperson of the Committee of Focal Points. Your Excellency Honorable Emi Goy Lumbu, Chairperson of the African Governance Platform at political level, African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights. Your Excellency Mr. Dohil Dokama, APRM Focal Point, and representative of the Chairperson of the AU, and all APM members, or APRM member states, the delegations that are represented here, and Professor Ed Maroka, the CEO of APRM Continental Secretariat, and all of you distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Nairobi. This is the city in the sun, and you are lucky that you have come this week, that there is a bit of sun, but of course, our version of winter is actually quite prevalent, and I can tell some of you have witnessed it. And I would like to assure you that despite the climatic changes that are taking place, Nairobi still is comfortable to live in, but has very, should I say, hospitable weather all around the year, even though during summer days, the temperatures can remain too moderate for some people, but that's still welcoming. Let me say that I pride myself to be here providing these remarks because, as I said yesterday to the delegation, I started off a long time ago with the APRM, and especially formulating the initial indicators of African peer review mechanism. Of course, I worked as an economist, and I was just the technical person invited to do just that. And I'm happy over the years. I can't even remember. I was trying to remember the first years, but they were initial years. I think I've done so many things over time that I've forgotten the years, but there are so many years in between that this is quite active, and it has now crossed over even to check our institutional makeup and even look at some of the issues that we are launching in today, like the governance issues. Kenya, of course, prides itself as one of the foremost members of the African peer review mechanism. And we do believe that the peer review process seeks to foster good governance by adopting policies, standards, practices that will lead to political stability, that will also lead to high economic growth, because you cannot have any economic activity without political stability. But more importantly, we are all looking for sustainable development and accelerated sub-regional and continental integration through sharing of experiences, and of course, the enforcement of success stories and even best practices that aims to individualize the APRM even for better achievements and track records. We do believe that those are very, very important indicators or maybe achievements that we like to go for and to achieve. Ladies and gentlemen, we all appreciate that without peace and stability, our efforts at economic integration and acceleration of sustained economic growth and even economic activities themselves and development would just be in vain. For economic integration to happen, and indeed for the Africa we want, as enshrined in the Africa Agenda 2063, it cannot be realized. What we really need to do is, first of all, to think and rethink about how to foster peace, how to foster stability, as well as innovative thinking in the development discourse. In fact, when I look around myself, because I'm coming from the other side of the world, where I like dealing with frontier ideas and innovative ideas, I feel that there is a side of us, or a part of our country that has gone to sleep. And one of them is institution. I'll talk about institution, and I will be focusing very much on institutional DNA, what I call institutional DNA. But forgive me for saying that, because I do believe from where I've come from, I'm now just, by the way, how long have I been in this job? 8 months. Eh? Yes, you can imagine. I've now 8 months, I'm still fresh. I can still recall some of the areas that I've covered, some of the studies that I've covered, some of the journals I've actually revised. Yesterday, I was hit by one from the Journal of African Economies that was summarizing the studies on growth, poverty, inequality, and redistribution in Africa, and what is the frontier thinking. So you can imagine we are still looking into areas that are very important. This morning, I was editing some papers on climate action. Again, that is some work that I did some years back, just following me up when everybody wants to deal with climate change. So the climate action will be an input. So for all this, it is for this reason that I pay tribute to the African Union General Assembly for commissioning the AGR 2023, the African Governance Report 2020, loss of lives, as well as destruction of property. It also creates pitfalls of what we think is our democracy, with very weak institutions and lack of respect to the rule of law. This goes against the beliefs of the African peer review mechanism fraternity that champions for good governance. And that's why that report is very, very important. I've, of course, focused on so many issues here, but I want to pinpoint institutions. When we talk about institutions in the respect of rule of law, is very, very powerful component and transcends across disciplines. Where I've come from, I always used to say that we should have the institutional DNA. There are two components of the institutional DNA. One of them is that institutions must help us redefine the legal framework. In normal language, we call it the rules of the game, isn't it? Because you cannot play a game if there are no rules, isn't it? And that game cannot be complete if everybody does not adhere to the rules of the game. So democracy itself has rules of the game. When we go to the elections, we have the rules of the game. The winner is properly defined, and the loser must accept that. It's respecting the rule of law, respecting the rules of the game. The second component of institutions is actually they have to define appropriate incentives. That is the reward structure. And you can imagine, from where I sit myself, a combination of the rules of the game or legal framework and the reward system or incentive mechanism is a very good combination that will encourage virtually everywhere economic activity, the markets to work. I used to say that when I was a governor of the central bank. I used to say that adherence to the rules of the game and an appropriate definition of appropriate incentives is going to encourage prudent behavior in the marketplace. And that is where economic activity is defined. And that is where in the market, economic rent is actually produced and distributed. You can imagine we can transcend across everything else. That is why when we look at the APRM, we also want to actually say that it needs to come up with a pivot of how the quality of institutions and how those institutions function. Do they define the appropriate rules of the game? Do they define appropriate incentives for the reward structure and uphold that reward structure across generations? Because that is what is going to keep us into prosperity. I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, all of you have some element of that. All of you can link those to so many ideas and so many activities that you are involved in. It is that applicability that allows us to interpret what you see today and how you relate it to what you do, and even how we can apply it across. That is what I call innovative thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, the AGR process provides space for member states of the APRM to undertake an evaluation of their institutions by self-assessment of aspects of their governance, socioeconomic development. And that for me is very, very important. You need to know when it is working and when it's not working, isn't it? The new administration in Kenya has emphasized on better, bottom-up economic transformation agenda. And there are two words there, bottom-up. Why bottom-up? It's because for years we have neglected some of our performances so that we start building the pyramid at the bottom is actually bulging. So it means we are having more poor people. In fact, the study that I cited today that hit me today with a special issue of a journal is actually making a strong conclusion that growth can significantly reduce poverty, but it has to be supplemented by targeted social protection programs to flatten inequality in the long run. 20 years ago, the conclusion was that inequality can choke growth. So in a sense, you needed to have very strong growth that can actually flatten inequality. But we have realized it cannot happen on its own. So it means you have to have targeted social protection programs that will support growth, and growth will actually reduce poverty significantly. So in a sense, we have moved away from pro-poor growth strategy to pro-growth poverty reduction strategy. So you can imagine we have turned around. Why are we turning around? Because we have realized that we have not moved 20 years down the line. That's the first thing, bottom up. That is, we have to focus on that. The second component of a new administration is actually to look at the economic transformation. Why is it that 60 years down the line, especially for Kenya, we haven't had any economic transformation? Do we need a magic or miracle? The bottom line is that we need to go back to the drawing board in terms of human capital development. East Asian miracles were there. They succeeded because of 50 years of investing in human capital. They were able, even their human capital accumulation was very significant. You can see some writers like Justin Lin from China. He has argued that. Somebody is also talking. He has argued that capital accumulation has thresholds that can ignite economic transformation. So what we are really saying in Kenya is that if you don't deal with the bottom-up economic transformation, that is the bottom-up that have been left behind, if you don't have interventions, then you cannot accelerate economic transformation. But you can imagine the massive resistance that we are facing in Kenya because of that. Because what we are seeing, people think what we are seeing is just anything out of the blue. It is resistance. We have to change when time comes. But that is important for us. And what we are seeing now, if we have to look at socioeconomic development, is a whole issue of what we think change is going to bring. And we have to resist change. It plays a significant role to strengthen institutions. And that's why I focused on institutions and giving examples. By infusing their lives and opinions as practice of promoting good governance, it is what is going to help us shape the institutions. It is what is going to help us build consensus of the way forward, because institutions are there to guard against rule of the law and incentives. And in economists we talk about incentives, but actually what you mean is in lay language is the reward system. So when you're doing well, you are rewarded, isn't it? And when you're doing wrong, you are penalized. So you should not complain when you're penalized. Okay, that is, of course, I'm sorry, I went to that discipline and I swore to support the discipline to the core. And that is what it means to understand it. I've been there in driving different policies in my earlier life. And I've always fought and argued that financial inclusion was going to be very, very important to eradicate poverty because it allows you space to save, to accumulate resources and escape cycles of poverty. But you have seen that in Kenya, for example, we call it the perfect storm. It was accelerated and persistent shocks. It was going to be very difficult for you not to be impoverished by those shocks. The climate change was there, move back to Ukrainian crisis, move back to COVID-19, move back, anything has come to us. So in a sense, we have to say, this is time to think afresh and look for new ideas, look for innovative ideas, and look for strengthening institutions so that they can sustain us in the future. Therefore, as we launch this report today, allow me to pay tribute to the member states that volunteered to be reviewed. And when you volunteer to be reviewed, it means that you are balanced. You are not going to complain if you are criticized, isn't it? You have accepted to be reviewed because you know that the outcome is yours. The outcome is going to describe you as you are. Let's not run away from the truth because we keep running away from the truth and you know what happens, it follows you. So, and of course, those who participated have demonstrated commitment to turning the page in the near future. Once you show that they have not been performing well, they want to know where are our weak points and how can we change? How can we rebuild ourselves so that we do not have change of government because of weak institutions? For me, that is very, very important. It is Kenya's hope that the lessons drawn from this study will help us all create conditions that yield positive and seamless transitions for sustained economic growth and development across our continent. That is in itself is very, very important because we all believe in future generations. In fact, I was actually saying, even disciplines like economics, we start by saying, you want to maximize income for intergenerational transfers. And we change over time because those intergenerational transfers will keep changing their needs. So you also have to cope with the changing in lives and changing system of bequests, isn't it? I was telling some friends of mine the other day that you find that every time I was reminded, but there's a boom in the city for people buying apartments. And everybody believed that there was, what is it called? Bubble. I told them that there's no bubble. Because a bubble is where, by the time a construction is taking place, people have bought and have sold like 5 times. And there's value addition at every stage, isn't it? So it's a bubble, that's the bubble. And it will get to a point where it bursts. But if you do a study in Kenya, you realize that nobody sells. They buy to keep. So the question is why? One is because they want perpetual rental income flow. But the second one, and more importantly, is that the system of bequests has changed. That is what they are going to use for bequests, isn't it? So you can see most people are moving faster than us institutions and even government. Those who are government ministers, like perhaps 10 or 15 years ago, telling me that there is a bubble. And I say there's no bubble. And let me explain. Of course, they got the explanation. But it reminds me, we haven't seen the bubble burst. Since for the last 15 years or so, we haven't seen a bubble bursting. So why? So they have now come to believe me. So in a sense, we see this transformation but we need to map them by understanding what is really happening. How do we relate them to what we do, and even the policies we expound? So as I continue to expand, to comment the APRM mechanism and providing these examples, because they are real examples. You know, I have a common saying that I tell people that I know the streets of the city I live in. Because if I don't know the streets of the city, I should not live in that street, isn't it? In that city, isn't it? Why? What I'm really saying is that I observe changes over time. I observe what is happening over time, and I relate it. I relate it to one, policy; two, what is happening to institutions; three, what are people's mind thinking. That is, for me, is very, very important. So for me, this is a learning experience. And as I continue talking about APRM, it's because we want to see even those indicators of African peer review mechanism must change with time. And we have seen that changing and that becoming an input. I also want to commend member states for their willingness to be subjected to rigorous reviews in the pursuit of better common future as African people. Kenya will continue lending a strong, very strong support to the initiatives aimed at attaining the developmental objectives of the African Agenda 2063. It's the futuristic, it's important, but we need to roll it with very strong policies that are going to sustain that posterity. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to inform you that in the coming months, Kenya will host its inaugural national summit for the county peer review mechanism. We have a devolved system of government. We want to make sure that even in that devolved system of government, we can have examples, and we would like to see champions being peer reviewed. And we want to see at least 10 governors or even counties and their governors that are scheduled for the peer review mechanism that are in the process. And we want to show that it mirrors the APR summit of the heads of states and government that have participated in the APRM. What we want to show is that you can do that at the national level, but you can do that at a devolved level, that is a county level. And we want to show that you can actually showcase that as a reflection of what is national policies and what are the devolved policies, and they are not any different. We want to make sure that that development is mirrored and preparing every arm of government in terms of reflecting and even having the same kind of ambition for the future. But let me also say that you are invited to the open session for this historic exercise that will open a new chapter and the entrenchment of APRM governance that has been expounded by AU and even the NEPAD. We are very happy about that. And we want to make sure that those principles can be reflected in Kenya's devolved government structures. Hopefully, this will generate interest for replication in the jurisdictions, in other jurisdictions across the continent. And that is going to be very, very important because that peer review, that peer reference is very, very important. I can make a lot of comments, but I still end up saying with those few remarks. So you have to understand the teacher in me. The teacher in me is to make sure that the subject matter is understood, that subject matter can be related, that subject matter can be retained with examples. But let me, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to actually add here. And once again, welcome you and wish you a happy launch of the African Governance Report 2023. It is something we look forward to. We want to listen carefully to what are the results. We want to see how we relate to those results. We want to see whether we have been contributory factors to those results. And we want also to see whether you have been asleep when you see those results and you have not queried them. You know, there are people who observe and waive them, but we want to make sure that you use them, you apply them, you question them, and you question those people who actually drive that kind of negative behavior or negative change. We want to make sure that we sustain our own institutions with better reflections in terms of what we do. And with those few remarks, let me say, merci beaucoup, asante sana.
Thank you, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. I know if we would have added you more time, you still would have had a lot to say. With those few remarks also, thank you so much. We move on now. I see we're a little bit behind time, but we'll try and play catch up. I want to take this opportunity, Your Excellencies, to invite Ambassador Bankole Adeyo, the Commissioner of Political Affairs, Peace and Security, African Union. Asante sana. Let's welcome him to the podium as he makes his way.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to align with all the speakers before me because everything about this report has been stated. But permit me to emphasize the need for our continent to remain on course when it comes to democratic governance. Governance that is effective, that can yield peace dividends, that can yield the transformation the minister spoke about, that can yield the guarantee, the safeguard for human rights, human and people's rights in every facet that my sister, Madam Lita, spoke about. So we are fully aligned with the recommendations, policy recommendations of this report, and we commend the CEO of the APRM Continental Secretariat and his staff, and of course, every member of the AGA, the African Governance Architecture Platform. That platform is being transformed into a combination, a synergic combination that will see AGA and AFSA. AFSA is the Africa Peace and Security Architecture, and its governance components working hand in hand. I really want to assure you that it's not just the economic transformation that will be critical for our continent, it is also political transition. As we go ahead, our transitions cannot be endless. Our transitions cannot be complex. Our transitions cannot be complicated. They must be inclusive. They must be based on the wishes of our people. And what our people desire on our continent is a change that inspires democracy, that inspires economic transformation, and of course, that inspires stability. When we have stability, we will prosper. And this is why we must roundly, consistently condemn without exception all forms of unconstitutional changes of government. It is only necessary that we stick to the democratic track. And this report energizes us, for us in the commission. And on behalf of the chairperson of the commission, I really commend this report and I encourage every one of us as stakeholders, but we must take it to the street. Take this report to the streets so that our people, our youth, women, all actors, all the stakeholders, academia, professional groups, labor unions, people living with disabilities, all of us must own Africa that is democratic. It cannot be just norms and shared values anymore. It must be a change for the better. But excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, democracy that does not work, that does not deliver food on the table, that does not protect the helpless, that does not deliver the necessary goods, the public goods, that does not even deliver regional integration. It's not democratic. It has to be owned by all of us. And once again, on behalf of the chairperson of the commission, I really want to commend the APRM for the leadership it has shown in the Africa Governance Report. And I urge all of us to digest this report, ensure that unfortunately, the 4 countries that have been currently suspended for unconstitutional changes of government will have inclusive, workable, credible, transparent political transition so that we can welcome them back to the family with open arms. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for donating your 3 minutes to us. We appreciate greatly. Asante sana. I think you spoke to Prof. You gave him your minutes. You know, when Prof was asking how long he has been in office, he looked at me. And perhaps you didn't understand why he looked at me. Because away from this, we put him in check as a media. So everything, we keep on reminding them, it's 8 months, it's 6 months, 100 days. So that's why he looked at me, but he's a good man. Asante, Prof. Thank you so much. He's been my friend for the last 13 years. Yeah. So I'd like to take this opportunity again to welcome Fortune Charumbira, the president of the Pan-African Parliament, the senator. Oh, he's walked out. Okay, as we wait for him to come back, I'll take this opportunity to invite Your Excellency Mohamed Fadé Yamkela, Minister of Political and Public Affairs, also APRM focal point for the Republic of Sierra Leone, the chairperson of APR Committee of the Focal Points. Let's welcome him as he makes his way.
I say asante sana, Mr. Moderator. And I think before I can start my statement, I think the 1 minute that was saved there can be allocated to me. Because I think I must take that 1 minute in really saying thanks to my brother, Professor Ndungu, for really giving us an enlightening lecture. Be the professor he is. I think Eddie, Mr. CEO, there is so much from his statement, I think that can be included in our report. I think his statement was very enlightening. Thank you very much. Well, I'll start my statement. Your Excellency, Professor Njuguna Ndungu, Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury and Planning of Kenya, and the APRM focal point. I think I start off with you. I'll assume that you are the representative of Kenyan government here. Your Excellency Dohia Kamal, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Union of Comoros and APRM focal point. Honorable Remi Ngoy Lumbu, Chairperson of the Africa Governance Platform at the political level. Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, the AU Commissioner for Political Affairs. Professor Eddie Maloka, the CEO of the Continental Secretariat. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed honored to address this gathering at the launch of the much anticipated third edition of the African Governance Report, or AGR 23, as it is commonly referred to. At this stage, I think on behalf of all of us here, I think I'm in place to thank the Kenyan government of His Excellency William Ruto and the people of the Republic of Kenya for the warm welcome and hospitality I think we've all received since our arrival in Nairobi. The genesis of this AGR 23 lies specifically in the mandate accorded by the AU Assembly of Heads of State and Government to the APRM, based on the request formulated by the chairperson of the APR Forum of Heads of State and Government, His Excellency Julius Maada Bio, the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone in Malabo, a little over a year ago, during the AU Extraordinary Summit on Humanitarian Emergencies, Terrorism, and Unconstitutional Changes of Government. What the APRM Continental Secretariat has pulled off since that summit, I must say, is remarkable, and the outcomes speak for themselves. Indeed, The fruits of this endeavor are 6 case studies, 5 thematic reports on the catalysts, causes and triggers of unconstitutional changes of government in Africa, and 2 consultative reports on the effectiveness of the global sanctions regime, which have fed into the production of an Africa governance report investigating 1, constitutional order, state legitimacy and changes of government; 2, the integrity of democratic elections and changes of government; 3, economic governance, public sector accountability and changes of government; 4, diversity management, human rights and changes of government; and 5, popular uprisings, mass protests, military interventions, and changes of government. The APRM Continental Secretariat merits our thanks for shedding light on the complex causes of unconstitutional changes of government in such a short time to enable the AU to mobilize and direct resources where they should be placed. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, African democracy since the 1990s has grown at a steady pace, expanded freedoms, raised standards of living, and framed political contestation by banishing war and other forms of violence used to gain power and combat injustice. What we now take for granted, that is, gender equality, recognition of ethnic minorities, or institutional development, is a product of the democratization of our body politic and the affirmation of our God-given rights as individuals with the capacity to make life-shaping choices autonomously. Certainly, the expansion of democracy has come with opportunities, but also severe challenges, such as hate speech, fake news, and a decline in popular participation in communal life due to the impatience with democratic processes. The old prism through which we analyze erratic developments to soften their impact and regain stability has proven to be largely inadequate to explain the origins of our current democratic malaise and the cure required to treat it. Therefore, the third decade of our democratic experiment compels us to assess the resilience of our political systems, as well as the menace that continuous popular grievances, especially those related to security, pose to them. The continental events which have precipitated the commissioning of this study on unconstitutional changes of government have roots in social, political, and economic disturbances that are both endogenous and exogenous. The honest assessment of democratic shortcomings will dictate the success of our responses. Not everything that we must tackle is of our own making. We should correctly locate the provenance of our challenges and spare no effort in eliminating those whose creation we have contributed to whether knowingly or unknowingly. The tools we employ to understand and refine the modern African democracy must be informed by an unbiased and a comprehensive methodology that meticulously examines all drivers of unconstitutional changes of government. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to be sure, alien iterations of democracy also suffer weaknesses. One need only at the acrimonious attempt to settle electoral disputes in America, its richest and most flamboyant example on an early similar manifestation in Brazil earlier this year. It is tempting to listen only to the members of our political tribe and share their views while ignoring the ideas and criticisms of the adversarial camp. Though the nurturing democracy is a collective endeavor, its inhibition often is a private and cynical enterprise. In the absence of bargaining, decision-making turns into ruling by fiat, broadening the scope of consultations and valuing the opinions of not just political opponents, but also the citizenry is a sure way of preventing excesses and averting the descent into turmoil. Cultivating dialogue among political parties, which the APRM is advancing, and between them and the public, will foster a better appreciation of the Republic, the common thing. Grasping its true purpose will surely change our expectations of, but not also our responsibilities to it. The education of individuals on their rights and the obligations is crucial to the proper functioning of our countries and continent. I therefore urge civil society organizations to play a bigger role in the building of a democratic culture across Africa that prioritizes discussion over discord and compromise over conflict. Following today's ceremony, the AGR 23 will soon be launched in the 6 countries which were reviewed last year. The lessons drawn from this report deserve to be widely read and shared to guard against pitfalls. I note with satisfaction preparations for a workshop on the implementation of all 3 AGRs in the weeks to come. Addressing a particular governance issue does not end with the development of the AGR. The laborious but rewarding work follows the launch, and the APRM Continental Secretariat should work in tandem with its membership to translate all of the AGR's recommendations into better policies and frameworks at the national and continental levels. At this stage, I think I've just mentioned that there is a hell of a lot of work ahead of the APRM Continental Secretariat. But I think we're all aware that sooner than later, by early 2024, the current CEO will be handing over the baton of the leadership of that organization to somebody else. We do implore the outgoing and the incoming to be able to realize and know that the APRM has gone a long way. Eddie, we must thank you. You've done quite a lot to bring the APRM to what it is. And also, we must implore on you that you have left a huge task for the APRM to accomplish. I hope you'll be magnanimous enough, and your successor will also be able to accept advices from you for us to ensure that we implement these recommendations. Please allow me to conclude by quoting the acclaimed son of this land, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who writes in the language of African literature. In doing similar kinds of things and actions over and over again, under similar circumstances, similar even in their mutability, certain patterns, moves, rhythms, habits, attitudes, experiences, and knowledge emerge. Those experiences are handed over to the next generation and become the inherent basis for their further actions on nature and on themselves. I thank you for this.
Thank you once more. And Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I think for all those remarks, we give them a round of applause before we launch the report. We thank you so much for your remarks. And now for the official launch of the report, I'd like to invite Your Excellency, Dr. Dohed Dolkumar, he's the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Union of Comoros. also APRM focal point and chairperson of the African Union Executive Council. Karibu sana.
Excellence, Ndungu, secrétaire du cabinet en charge du Trésor national et de la planification de la République du Kenya, point focal du MAIEP en République du Kenya. Excellence, Mohamed Foïd Youmkela, ministre des Affaires politiques et publiques, point focal du MAIEP en Sierra Leone, président du comité des points focaux du MAIEP. Honorable Ita Moussiimi au Ghana, commissaire à la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, représentant du président de la Commission éponyme, président de la plateforme de l'architecture africaine de gouvernance au niveau politique. Excellence Payenne Roussom, ambassadeur de l'Érythrée auprès de la République du Kenya et doyen du groupe des ambassadeurs africains, professeur Eddy Maloka, directeur général du secrétaire général du continental du MAIEP, Monsieur le commissaire Bamkoli, Excellences Mesdames, Lindui Koumou Malo, secrétaire exécutif par intérim de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples et président de la plateforme de l'architecture africaine de gouvernance au niveau technique, Excellences Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, chefs de mission, Excellences, chère assistance, encore une fois, salam alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mesdames et Messieurs, les représentants des États membres présents cette cérémonie, honorable assistance, je voudrais commencer mon propos en témoignant ma sincère gratitude au gouvernement de la République du Kenya et au peuple kényan pour leur accueil fraternel et pour toutes les dispositions prises afin de rendre mon séjour et celui de ma délégation, le plus agréable possible. Je suis honoré de me retrouver parmi vous aujourd'hui dans cette belle ville de Nairobi, capitale de la République de Kenya, pour le lancement officiel du rapport sur la gouvernance en Afrique 2023, axé sur les changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement en Afrique. Qu'il me soit permis de remercier chacun d'entre vous d'avoir accepté de participer à cet événement d'une importance capitale. Votre présence ici témoigne de l'intérêt que nous accordons tous au renforcement de la gouvernance en Afrique. Le mécanisme africain d'évaluation par les pairs, MAIEP, créé en 2003 par le comité des chefs d'État, occupe une place centrale dans nos efforts visant à promouvoir une meilleure gouvernance en Afrique. En tant qu'instrument africain d'auto-évaluation et de partage d'expériences, le MAIEP est désormais intégré en tant que quantité autonome de l'Union africaine avec un mandat élargi incluant le suivi de la mise en œuvre de l'agenda 2063. Le MAIEP vise avant tout à renforcer la qualité de la gouvernance au sein de nos États membres pour favoriser le développement économique et social, la stabilité politique, une croissance économique soutenue, un développement durable et une intégration économique régionale et continentale accélérée. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, il est important de souligner que le MAIEP n'est pas un instrument de classification de nos États, mais plutôt une plateforme permettant d'identifier les lacunes dans nos systèmes de gouvernance. Il favorise le dialogue national inclusif, le partage d'expériences et de bonnes pratiques entre les États membres. Lors de sa 30e session ordinaire, la conférence de l'Union africaine a décidé de positionner le MAIEP comme un outil d'alerte précoce pour la prévention des conflits sur le continent, en harmonie avec l'architecture africaine de paix et de sécurité, APSA, et l'architecture africaine de gouvernance, AGA. En mai 2022, lors du 16e sommet extraordinaire de l'Assemblée de l'Union africaine sur le terrorisme et les changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement qui s'est tenu à Malabo, en Guinée équatoriale, la conférence des chefs d'État et de gouvernement a chargé le MAEP et l'architecture africaine de la gouvernance AAG de remodeler la 3e édition du rapport biennal sur la gouvernance en Afrique, AGR 23, afin de refléter les questions liées au changement anticonstitutionnel de gouvernement sur le continent. C'est ainsi que le rapport sur la gouvernance en Afrique 2023 met l'accent principalement sur les changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement en Afrique, en effectuant des évaluations ciblées dans certains pays ayant connu de tels changements. Ce rapport revêt une importance capitale pour l'Afrique, car il permet d'abord, objectivement, les causes identifiées des changements anticonstitutionnels de gouvernement grâce à une approche fondée sur des preuves et des évaluations ciblées dans les États membres. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je suis particulièrement ravi de constater que les Comores ont été inclus dans ce rapport sur la gouvernance en Afrique 2023 grâce à leur engagement soutenu dans le processus du MAEP. Je voudrais rappeler à l'assistance ici que mon pays, les Comores, a été connu avant pour être le champion des coups d'État au monde. Et je peux vous rassurer qu'aujourd'hui, nous avons beaucoup d'expérience à partager avec vous parce que cette page est définitivement tournée. Les Comores ont accueilli avec enthousiasme la première mission de sensibilisation du MAEP en août 2023, avant même d'être membre de cette institution. Quelques mois plus tard, en octobre 2022, les Comores ont accueilli une mission d'évaluation du MAEP marquée par la participation du chef de l'État et de tous les membres du gouvernement. Les experts du MAEP ont parcouru tout le pays, rencontré toutes les couches de la société comorienne et de la société civile aux partis politiques, de la mouvance présidentielle, de l'opposition, du secteur privé, aux notables, aux associations féminines, sans aucune entrave. C'est une étape importante, mais il reste encore beaucoup à faire, notamment en ce qui concerne la mise en œuvre des recommandations découlant de ce rapport. Je crois avoir sauté, excusez-moi. Le rapport reçu de cette mission a été présenté au chef de l'État, qui a exprimé sa pleine disponibilité à accompagner le MAEP dans la recherche de solutions africaines aux problèmes africains. Nous sommes prêts à partager nos expériences et à apprendre des autres pays afin de consolider cette stabilité politique et de promouvoir une cohésion sociale durable. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, en signant le protocole d'adhésion des Comores au MAEP en février dernier, le président de l'Union des Comores et président en exercice de l'Union africaine, son Excellence Azali Assoumani, a démontré sa volonté et sa disponibilité à travailler avec le MAEP pendant et après son mandat de l'Union africaine pour atteindre une adhésion universelle. Pour ma part, je m'engage personnellement aux côtés du professeur Eddy Maloka, directeur général du MAEP, à faire de l'adhésion universelle une réalité avant la fin de l'année 2023, je l'espère. J'encourage les autres pays qui n'ont pas encore adhéré au MAEP à suivre cet exemple et à joindre cette institution dont les principes, objectifs et missions sont, à mon avis, les remèdes aux maux divers qui affligent notre continent. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui pour le lancement officiel du rapport sur la bonne gouvernance en Afrique de l'année 2023. C'est une étape importante, mais il nous reste encore beaucoup à faire, notamment en ce qui concerne la mise en œuvre des recommandations découlant de ce rapport. J'appelle donc à une solidarité, une coopération accrue entre les États africains pour transformer ces recommandations en un plan d'action concret afin d'atteindre les objectifs fixés. En dernier lieu, je voudrais adresser à l'endroit de Son Excellence, M. William Ruto, président de la République du Kenya, à l'ensemble du gouvernement kenyan et ainsi qu'à toutes les autorités de ce grand pays et son peuple, chaleureux remerciements pour les efforts consentis en vue de garantir un succès éclatant de cet important événement. Je crois que des grands professeurs, des universitaires ont intervenu tout à l'heure. On se croyait un amphithéâtre. Et je pense que l'ensemble de l'auditoire qui est ici a bien intégré, a bien compris. Et ils vont le démontrer, je le pense, à travers l'appropriation de ce rapport dont ils vont être ceux qui vont le disséminer partout en Afrique pour faire la promotion de la paix. Et je retiens aussi ce qu'a dit le commissaire Bamkolé tout à l'heure et le professeur aussi, il n'y aura pas de démocratie de bonne gouvernance sans que quelque chose soit mis dans la bouche de façon continue pour qu'on puisse, le développement économique s'impose. Sans le développement économique, on n'aura pas de développement, on n'aura pas de paix ni de stabilité durable. On n'aura pas de bonne gouvernance sans un développement économique. Donc, ça va de pair. C'est pour cela que le MAIEP est aussi investi pour voir la bonne gouvernance sur le côté économique, sur le côté du développement. Et c'est par rapport à ces mots que je vous invite tous à nous lever pour lancer officiellement à déclarer ici à nous tous de prier pour que ce rapport soit approprié, comme nous l'avons dit tout à l'heure, à l'ensemble des Africains. Et je voudrais que nous tous nous levons pour déclarer officiellement lancer le rapport sur la gouvernance en Afrique 2023 et voici. Il est là. Merci à vous tous.
Thank you very much.
La gouvernance soit africaine, Inch'Allah.
Thank you very much. Once more, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, thank you very much for your speeches. And I would like to request that Your Excellencies up here at the podium, if you could just step out for a moment to take pictures with your copies of the reports. We'll take just a few minutes for the picture just outside the building. Just about 5 minutes, then we'll set you back. Thank you. With your reports, yes. Just outside the building for a photo opportunity with the report. You're free to take pictures with them just outside. We are convening back in about 5 minutes after the pictures. Najua, when I see you.
Even though they had to. I kind of was December. Yeah. No. We already 1 hour again. Yeah, for another 1 hour. Yes, at most 6 p.m.
Issue of unconstitutional change of government, it's a reflection of the extent to which we have a much, you could say, a challenge in this area as Africa.
President Alpha Condé. Political development in Mali.
Less than a month later, Tunisia's government fell.
issue of unconstitutional change of government, it's a reflection of the extent to which we have you could say, a challenge in this area as Africa. And we had managed to put it under control at the end of the 1990s when African Union, at that time it was the OAU, started developing an approach and a doctrine on how to deal with unconstitutional change of government. Because for the 70s and the 80s, that's how leaders exchange, or that's how leadership transitions happened in Africa. It was through military coups and all of that.
And the Africa Governance Report is a biennial report of the African Union, the policy report of the African Union, in fact. And this is a report that's produced every 2 years by the APRM in collaboration with the Africa Governance Architecture. Around May, 28th May, there was also a summit in Malabo, at which there was a determination that the Africa Governance Report should focus on constitutional change of government. And there are concerns that if you look at the period and the number of constitutional change of government, particularly those related to coups, the intensity is unprecedented when you look at the span across 2-decade span. And at this point, the African Union and other governments, of course, were of the conviction that we had made so much gains in democratic reforms and the introduction of democracy, entrenching democracy on the continent, that it is highly unlikely that we would experience a change of government.
For those who value peace, security, development, and good practice, the unconstitutional change of government is not a good thing, because many a times it slows down development when citizens and military and all the other concerned actors get involved in that. Other things stagnate.
Unconstitutional change is not a good thing in our countries. But at the end of the day, you should not only look at the phenomena, you look at the underlying causes of this.
Well, despite the attempts and the efforts to build the Africa we want, and also to build the Africa that is united, prosperous, and peaceful, we must also recognize the fact that we are still facing huge governance deficits on the continent. And that is unfortunately what really led in many cases to the unconstitutional governments in many parts of Africa.
We are working with information that's coming from the populations, the actors that are at the center of the dynamic, in the context where this dynamic actually occurs. And this is also another very rare quality of the basis upon which decisions are made on what the African Union and member states should do vis-a-vis the phenomenon of constitutional change of government. So the thematic analysis that we're conducting for this report actually focuses on these 5 thematic areas. First is that we have engaged experts who were called thematic experts to look at the themes that have emerged over the past 2 years on this question of unconstitutional change of government. The second prong of the development of the report involves what we call targeted reviews. And so an instrument was developed, and the APRM had fielded missions to countries, 6 countries, where they had the conversations with government, public there, on what they consider to be the causes, as well as what would be the potential remedies and redress of this of unconstitutional change of government. So missions were fielded to Lesotho, Sierra Leone, the Comoros, Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. And these reports were basically aimed at getting the primary data, information, and perspectives from actual countries that have experienced this phenomenon regarding what would be the best way forward and what are the lessons that we can derive from their experiences. The third prong, or rather stream of development development of this report is a couple of consultative missions on the normative framework for sanctions regimes for unconstitutional change of government. And so the APRM fielded a mission to the United States, the UN, particularly the UN Security Council Secretariat branch, and also to the US government. And this review of the normative frameworks for sanctions regimes for unconstitutional change of government, the aim was really to look at what are the coherences and contradictions between the frameworks that are used by the United Nations, by the US government bilaterally, or the French government and the EU, versus their own framework for sanctions.
We always say that we have our problems fall into three categories: governance, peace and security, and development. So, but if you look at it and the relationship among these three challenges, you could say that governance is the base to Africa's challenge, because governance is about leadership. So if you get leadership right, then you are able to get leaders who will make sure that we don't have conflict in Africa, and leaders, of course, who prioritize the development of the continent.
The most pertinent and indispensable undertaking when you're addressing a problem has to do with you understanding the problem, understanding the phenomena, the dynamic of that particular problem. And that means that you have to have the right information, the right intelligence, so to speak, correct information, relevant information for you to understand the problem. It's on the basis of the correct understanding of the problem that you can actually conceive the right strategies and the right measures to address the problem. This is precisely what the African Governance Report is aimed at, to have an accurate diagnosis of the problem, understanding of the problem, so that governments and the African Union can come up with the right strategies and measures.